The rain was falling in thin, icy needles, slashing through the dense canopy of the forest. Lisa tightened her grip on the flashlight, her breath misting in the cold night air. Her car, a faithful companion of 5 years, lay wrecked against an ancient oak a mile back. The crash was almost silent in the suffocating quiet of the woods, just the groan of metal crumpling and the hiss of steam. She hadn't seen the animal until it was too late, a shadow darting across the road, too large to be a deer. The moment of impact left her dazed, a metallic tang filling her mouth as she bit her tongue. The creature had vanished, leaving only its ghostly image burned into her memory. The flashlight beam quivered as her hand trembled. She had no choice but to find help, her phone inexplicably dead despite a full charge earlier. The forest, sprawling and unfamiliar, whispered around her, the trees arching their backs like silent watchers. Then, through the labyrinth of shadow and mist, she saw it. The house. It stood tall and skeletal, its spindly frame silhouetted against the stormy sky. Windows like dead eyes reflected nothing of the outside world. The sight struck her as both a blessing and a warning, a beacon of hope wrapped in a shroud of menace. Lisa's instinct screamed at her to turn away, to risk the night and the forest, but her logic countered with icy pragmatism. Shelter was shelter, no matter how foreboding. The gravel path leading to the house crunched underfoot as she approached. The closer she got, the more details emerged. The porch was sagging, the wooden panels blistered with age. A brass knocker shaped like a snarling wolf gleamed unnaturally in the pale moonlight. Her pulse quickened. The air grew colder, denser, as though the house was pulling her in, compressing her surroundings. She hesitated on the porch, her fingers brushing against the knocker. She didn't need to use it. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a cavernous hallway that seemed to stretch far beyond the physical dimensions of the house. Shadows danced along the peeling wallpaper, and the faint scent of mildew mixed with something metallic and sharp. "Hello!" Her voice was too small, swallowed whole by the void. A single light bulb flickered overhead, casting intermittent flashes of yellowed light. It illuminated the walls, adorned with ornate mirrors, each one framed with intricate carvings that seemed to writhe under the faint glow. Lisa took a tentative step inside, her wet sneakers squeaking against the warped wooden floor. The door groaned shut behind her, locking out the sound of the storm, or locking her in. Her flashlight beam caught the edge of a mirror, and she turned toward it. The surface rippled like disturbed water, distorting her reflection into a grotesque, unrecognizable figure. Her stomach churned. The figure moved on its own. It raised a hand, fingers pointing toward the staircase at the end of the hall. The gesture was both an invitation and a command. Lisa's heart thudded in her chest, her mind scrambling for reason. But the forest was dark. The house offered safety, didn't it? The reflection pointed again, more urgently, its eyes hollow voids that seemed to bore into her soul. She took a deep breath and stepped toward the stairs. The house sighed around her, and she swore she could hear whispers seeping from the walls. Something was waiting for her above. Lisa's hand trailed along the banister as she climbed the staircase, its wooden surface rough and splintered. Every step groaned beneath her weight, the sound swallowed by the heavy silence of the house. The flashlight's beam jittered with her trembling hands, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. Halfway up, she froze. The whispers she'd heard earlier grew clearer, voices layered atop one another like the hum of a restless crowd. But they weren't speaking. No, they were pleading. "Don't go. Turn back. It's too late." Her heart leapt into her throat, and she spun around, expecting to find someone, anyone behind her. The staircase was empty. The hallway below yawned in darkness, the front door now gone, replaced by a blank, unbroken wall. "Keep it together," Lisa muttered under her breath. Her voice sounded foreign, swallowed almost immediately by the oppressive air. "Just get to the top, find a phone, call for help." She forced her feet to move, her body resisting as though the air itself was thickening, trying to hold her back. The whispers faded into a low hum as she reached the landing. At the top of the stairs, a narrow hallway stretched into the darkness, flanked by closed doors on either side. The first door on her left was slightly ajar. Light spilled from the crack, warm and inviting, like a beacon in the gloom. "Hello? Is someone there?" she called out, her voice wavering. No response. The light flickered, and for a brief moment, a shadow passed beneath the door. She tightened her grip on the flashlight and pushed the door open, the hinges protesting loudly. The room beyond was bizarrely normal. A cozy bedroom, complete with a neatly made bed, a nightstand, and a desk by the window. A faint, familiar scent lingered in the air, lavender. It reminded her of her childhood home, of the evenings she'd spent curled up with her mother, reading stories in the glow of a bedside lamp. On the desk sat a rotary phone, its black surface gleaming under the dim light of the room. Relief surged through her. She rushed over and picked up the receiver, pressing it to her ear. Static hissed on the other end, a soft crackling that seemed to grow louder the longer she listened. Then, through the distortion, she heard a voice, a woman's, trembling and desperate. "Lisa, you shouldn't have come here." Her blood ran cold, and she dropped the receiver as though it had burned her. The phone began to ring, a piercing, unnatural sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the room. The door slammed shut behind her. She spun around, heart pounding, and saw her reflection in the large mirror hanging above the dresser. But it wasn't her reflection. The woman in the mirror wore her face, but her eyes were sunken, her skin pallid and stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. She reached out, her hand pressing against the glass, as though it were a thin membrane. "Lisa," the reflection whispered. "It won't let you leave." Lisa stumbled back, her legs hitting the edge of the bed. The phone continued to ring, each chime louder than the last, reverberating in her skull. She clutched her ears, squeezing her eyes shut. When she opened them, the room had changed. The bed was gone, replaced by a warped wooden table. The lavender scent had turned acrid, metallic. The walls bled darkness, their edges disappearing into an endless void. On the table lay a single sheet of paper, yellowed and brittle. Written on it in sharp, spidery handwriting was a riddle. What weighs you down but cannot be seen? What chains you in place but leaves no mark? Answer truthfully, or the door remains closed. Lisa stared at the words, her mind racing. The whispers had returned, louder and closer than before, circling her like a pack of unseen predators. Her voice cracked as she spoke aloud. "Guilt. The answer is guilt." The paper disintegrated in her hands, turning to ash. The ringing phone stopped abruptly, replaced by silence, so profound it pressed against her ears like a physical weight. The door creaked open. Lisa didn't hesitate. She bolted into the hallway, her flashlight flickering violently. The whispers followed, no longer murmuring but screaming. And from the darkness at the end of the hall, something began to move. Lisa sprinted down the hallway, her sneakers pounding against the warped floorboards. The flashlight's flickering beam barely pierced the oppressive darkness ahead. Behind her, the whispers had risen to a crescendo, a cacophony of voices screaming her name in tones both desperate and mocking. "Lisa, Laisa, you won't escape. You belong here." She choked back a sob as her heart hammered in her chest. At the far end of the hall, the faint outline of another door materialized, its edges glowing faintly with a sickly green light. It was her only way forward. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, deep and resonant, vibrating through the walls. "Do you think you can run from what you've done?" Lisa skidded to a halt, glancing over her shoulder. A dark, humanoid figure emerged from the shadows, its body shifting and rippling like smoke. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly, mirroring the light from the door ahead. Panic surged through her veins. She surged forward, forcing her legs to move despite the mounting exhaustion. As she neared the door, the whispers faded into laughter, high-pitched, childlike, and piercing. She reached out, her hand brushing against the cold surface of the door, when the wood underfoot gave way. With a sharp crack, the floor splintered, and she plunged into the abyss below. Lisa hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. Pain flared in her side, but adrenaline pushed her upright. The flashlight, now cracked, cast a faint, distorted beam across the room she'd landed in. This space was unlike the others, vast, cavernous, and eerily silent. The walls appeared to be made of stone, slick and pulsing faintly as though alive. A rancid smell filled the air, like decaying leaves mixed with burnt rubber. The beam of her flashlight caught movement to her left. She froze, turning slowly. A series of mirrors stood in a semicircle, their frames twisted like charred vines. Each surface shimmered unnaturally, the reflections moving out of sync with the room. She stepped closer, drawn despite the knot of fear tightening in her chest. In the first mirror, she saw herself as a child, no older than 8. Her reflection sat on the floor of a dimly lit bedroom, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Tears streamed down her younger self's face as she whispered, "It wasn't my fault. I didn't mean to." The image shifted violently, and the child looked directly at Lisa, her eyes wide with terror. "You left me. Why did you leave me?" Lisa staggered back, her heart pounding. "No, I didn't leave you," she whispered, though the words felt hollow even to her. The second mirror reflected a different scene. Lisa stood in her college dorm room, a half-empty bottle of wine on the desk beside her. A friend's photo was open on her phone, the screen glowing faintly. The friend's face was familiar, Mara, the bright, funny girl who'd begged her not to drive that night. The reflection laughed bitterly. "You were supposed to be my ride, Lisa, but you stayed at the party." The mirror cracked with a sound like bones snapping, splintering the image into shards. Each fragment showed a different scene from that night. A hospital room, a wrecked car, and the unmistakable image of Mara's face, pale and lifeless. "No, Lisa, breathe," stumbling backward. Her foot struck the base of the third mirror, and she turned reluctantly toward it. This mirror showed her as she was now, haunted, trembling, and trapped. But the reflection didn't mimic her movements. Instead, it pressed its hands against the glass and spoke, its voice a hollow echo of her own. "The house feeds on what you won't face. Keep running, and it will devour you." The ground beneath her feet began to shift, the stone buckling and groaning. The mirrors dissolved into black smoke, swirling upward to form a figure, tall, faceless, and radiating malice. Lisa stumbled away, her back hitting a wall that hadn't been there moments ago. The figure loomed closer, its shape rippling like a storm cloud. It spoke, its voice reverberating in her skull. "Choose, Lisa. Stay and face the truth, or run and lose yourself forever." A door materialized to her left, its frame glowing faintly. On the other side, she could see the outline of the forest, moonlight streaming through the trees. Her instincts screamed at her to take the door, to run as far from this nightmare as possible. But the figure extended an arm, pointing toward the center of the room, where the flickering image of her childhood self knelt, clutching the stuffed rabbit. The choice loomed like a shadow over her. Stay or leave. Her legs trembled, her mind reeled, and the house waited. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps, the walls of the cavernous room seeming to close in around her. The glowing door to her left beckoned, a chance at escape, at freedom from this suffocating nightmare. But her gaze kept returning to the child in the center of the room, her younger self trembling and clutching the stuffed rabbit. The figure of shadow loomed closer, its presence heavy and oppressive. "Choose," it whispered, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "The truth or oblivion." Lisa clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but the girl's tear-streaked face held her in place. Those wide, imploring eyes weren't just a reflection. They were a memory, a shard of herself long buried and ignored. "What happens if I stay?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. The shadow didn't answer. It simply stood, silent and immovable, waiting. Lisa turned to the glowing door. The forest beyond seemed impossibly serene, a world untouched by the horror she'd endured inside the house. The sight filled her with a desperate, aching hope. But as she took a step toward it, the whispers returned, faint but insistent. They emanated not from the room, but from within her mind. It will follow you. You can't outrun it. Face it, or it will consume you. She stopped, her foot hovering mid-step. Her throat tightened as she turned back to the child. The girl was rocking slightly, muttering under her breath. Lisa strained to hear the words. It wasn't my fault. I didn't mean to. Lisa swallowed hard. The memory crashed into her like a tidal wave. Her younger self, hiding in a closet, hearing the muffled sounds of shouting and breaking glass. The day her parents' marriage fractured irreparably. The day she'd locked herself away and pretended she couldn't hear them. I didn't mean to, Lisa whispered, echoing the girl's words. Her legs felt heavy as she moved toward the center of the room. I didn't mean to leave you there. The moment her hand touched the child's shoulder, the room exploded into motion. The walls folded inward, the air twisting with a deafening roar. The child turned to face her, and Lisa gasped. The girl's face was her own, but distorted, eyes sunken, mouth twisted into a silent scream. Her skin cracked like porcelain, black smoke seeping from the fractures. Do you think you can fix this? The girl hissed, her voice layered with malice and sorrow. You abandoned me. You ignored me. And now I am what you've become. Lisa stumbled back, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand. The child laughed, a brittle, hollow sound that reverberated through the room. It's too late to be sorry. The walls convulsed, their surfaces rippling like water. A figure emerged from the shadows. A woman in a tattered dress, her face obscured but familiar. Mara, why did you leave me? Mara's voice was soft, almost gentle, but laced with pain. You knew I needed you. Why wasn't I enough? I was scared, Lisa choked out. I didn't think you'd. Her voice broke, the weight of her guilt pressing down on her chest. The shadowy figure loomed behind Mara, its form shifting and expanding. You see now. It intoned. The house is not a prison. It is a mirror. The glowing door flickered, its edges fraying like burning paper. Lisa turned to it one last time, the promise of escape tantalizingly close. But she knew the truth now. The house wasn't the source of her torment. It was only the vessel. Her pain, her guilt, her fears, they were the architects of this nightmare. She faced the shadow. What do I do? The figure extended a hand, its fingers elongated and sharp. You accept. Only through the truth will the weight lift. Lisa hesitated. The child's fractured face stared up at her, Mara's silhouette trembling with sorrow. Her own reflection stared back at her from the shadow's depths, a distorted, broken version of the woman she once was. Her voice was barely a whisper. I accept. The figure's hand plunged into her chest, and the world dissolved into darkness. Darkness enveloped Lisa, a void so complete it felt as if the world had vanished. There was no floor beneath her feet, no air in her lungs. She was adrift in nothingness, yet her mind raced, raw and exposed. Memories unspooled before her like film on a projector. She saw herself, younger and freer, before the weight of her mistakes had begun to hollow her out. But the scenes quickly darkened. They weren't memories of joy. They were moments she had buried deep, moments she'd refused to face. Her father's voice echoed first, harsh and bitter. Stay out of this, Lisa. This is between your mother and me. The sound of glass shattering followed, her mother's muffled sobs like a knife in her chest. The memory shifted, and Lisa was back in that closet, clutching the stuffed rabbit so tightly its seams began to tear. I should have done something, she whispered to the void. Her voice sounded small, swallowed by the darkness. Another scene replaced the first. Mara's face flashed before her, vibrant and alive, the two of them laughing as they planned the party. Then came the night of the accident. The call Lisa had ignored because she didn't want to be the designated driver. Mara's voice haunted her, words she would never hear again. I wasn't there. Lisa admitted, her voice trembling. I wasn't there when it mattered. The void responded with silence, pressing against her, waiting for her to continue. More memories poured out, an avalanche of regret. The friendships she'd let crumble, the promises she'd broken, the way she'd isolated herself, drowning in work to escape the mess of her own making. I'm a coward, she said, the words bitter on her tongue. I ran away from everything. From them. From myself. The darkness rippled around her, and a cold, metallic voice spoke. And now you run no more. Light exploded from nowhere, blinding and harsh. Lisa shielded her eyes, the brightness searing through her. When she lowered her arm, she was no longer floating in darkness. She stood in the house again, but it was transformed. The walls were pristine, the wood polished and gleaming. Sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing the space in warmth. The air smelled of lavender, fresh and clean, not the acrid imitation she'd encountered earlier. But the mirrors remained, lining the walls like sentinels. Their surfaces shimmered, showing not twisted reflections, but fragments of her life. She saw herself as a child, as a teenager, as the woman she was now. Each version of her stared back, their expressions full of sadness, but also something else, acceptance. Is it over? Lisa asked aloud, her voice echoing in the stillness. The shadowy figure appeared again, stepping from the corner of the room. It no longer loomed. It was smaller now, more human in shape. Its edges flickered like a dying flame. Not over, it said, its voice softer than before. But changed. The house will remain, as will you. The mirror cannot be destroyed, only understood. Lisa frowned, her heart sinking. What does that mean? I thought I faced it. The figure raised a hand, silencing her. You have faced it, but the house is not yours alone. It holds all who have walked within its walls. It is a reflection of many truths, not just yours. Lisa glanced at the mirrors. The images within shifted, revealing faces she didn't recognize. Dozens, maybe hundreds of people. Each bore the same haunted look, their eyes heavy with grief and pain. This is your crossroads, the figure said. You may leave, but if you do, the house will follow. It will shape itself around you, its mirrors reflecting the pieces you've yet to mend. Lisa's stomach churned. And if I stay? The figure gestured to the mirrors, its form flickering more rapidly. You would join the others. The house would be yours to understand, to guide those who come after. It would no longer torment, but you would remain bound. A choice. Another impossible choice. Lisa's gaze lingered on the glowing door that had reappeared behind her, its light soft and inviting. It was the forest, the world outside. Freedom, or so it seemed, but her eyes returned to the mirrors, to the faces trapped within. Her own reflection stared back at her, worn but resolute. I can't run anymore, she whispered. The figure inclined its head, a faint echo of approval in the gesture. It dissolved into shadow, its final words hanging in the air. Then the house is yours. The house exhaled, a deep, resonant sigh that made the walls quiver and the floor hum beneath Lisa's feet. The mirrors on the walls flickered, their surfaces shimmering like pools of water caught in a trembling breeze. Her reflection dissolved, replaced by an infinite sea of faces. Some were young, others old, some terrified, others resigned. And then, as one, they turned to look at her. Lisa's breath hitched. The faces were no longer trapped or frozen. They moved freely, studying her as if weighing her worth. Whispers began to fill the air again, a low susurration of voices overlapping. Another joins us. The house chooses its own. Will she understand? Will she endure? The mirrors darkened, and the room stretched around her, the pristine light replaced with dim, flickering candle glow. A weight pressed against her chest, the enormity of her decision sinking in. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible. The house answered, not with words but with movement. The walls shifted, bending and twisting as if the house itself were alive. A door materialized before her, its frame crooked and worn, the surface etched with deep scratches. It opened slowly, revealing a staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Lisa hesitated. Every step she'd taken in the house had been a gamble, each choice leading her deeper into the unknown. But she couldn't turn back now. She descended the staircase, the air growing cooler with each step. Her flashlight, though cracked, cast just enough light to reveal the damp stone walls surrounding her. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, though she could no longer make out the words. At the bottom of the staircase, she found herself in a cavernous chamber. In its center stood a massive mirror, its frame carved with grotesque figures, snarling beasts, weeping children, and twisted bodies entwined in agony. The glass shimmered faintly, the surface alive with faint, rippling movements. Lisa approached cautiously. The whispers ceased as she reached the edge of the mirror's frame, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against her eardrums. Her reflection stared back, perfectly normal at first glance. But as she leaned closer, she noticed it blinked a moment too late, its movements just a fraction of a second out of sync. And then it spoke. "You are the keeper now," her reflection said, its voice layered and distorted. "The house will not harm you, but it will demand much of you." Lisa's hands trembled. "What do you mean?" The reflection's expression darkened, its mouth twisting into a faint, knowing smile. "You will be its guardian, its guide. Others will come, as you did, drawn by their fears, their guilt, their pain. You will help them see what they refuse to face." Lisa shook her head. I'm not strong enough for this." "You are," the reflection replied firmly, "because you chose to stay." The mirror rippled violently, its surface distorting as images began to form. Lisa saw a young boy, no older than 12, standing in a forest at dusk. His face was streaked with dirt, his eyes wide with fear as he approached the house. Another image replaced it. A woman in her 30s clutching a photo album to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she stepped onto the porch. Countless others followed, each a new soul drawn to the house, each burdened with something they couldn't leave behind. Their pain was palpable, radiating through the mirror like a pulse. "They will come," her reflection said, "and you will guide them, as I guided you." Lisa's heart sank. She wanted to protest, to demand answers, but deep down, she knew this was the price of her decision. The house didn't give second chances without taking something in return. "Is this my punishment?" she asked softly. The reflection smiled faintly. "It is your purpose." The chamber began to dissolve around her, the stone walls fading into shadow. Lisa closed her eyes against the blinding light that followed. When she opened them, she was standing in the hallway once more. The house was silent, still waiting. For the first time since she'd arrived, Lisa didn't feel afraid. The house was quiet, save for the faint creak of its wooden frame settling, as though testing its new keeper. Lisa stood in the hallway, the polished mirrors lining the walls reflecting nothing but faint, rippling shadows. She felt their watchful presence, but it no longer chilled her. The words of her reflection echoed in her mind. "They will come, and you will guide them." She didn't have to wait long. The front door, which had been closed and motionless since her decision, opened with an eerie slowness. Moonlight spilled across the floor, illuminating a figure silhouetted in the doorway. It was a boy, no older than 12, wearing a dirt-streaked hoodie and clutching a stuffed dinosaur to his chest. His face was pale, his wide eyes darting nervously around the room. He hesitated on the threshold, as though sensing the house's strange power. Lisa stepped forward instinctively, her voice gentle. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe here." The boy flinched at the sound of her voice, pulling the dinosaur closer. I don't know where I am," he stammered. "I was in the woods and I got lost. Then I saw this house." Lisa knelt to his level, forcing a reassuring smile. "What's your name?" "Sam," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, Sam," Lisa said softly. "I'm Lisa. You're not lost anymore. Come inside, it's cold out there." Sam hesitated, his gaze flicking to the mirrors. The rippling shadows seemed to draw his attention, and his grip on the stuffed dinosaur tightened. "Is it haunted?" he asked. Lisa hesitated, the weight of her new role pressing on her. "Not haunted," she said carefully. "But this house, it shows people things they need to see." Sam didn't look reassured, but he shuffled inside, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft thud. The house seemed to sigh, its walls creaking faintly as if acknowledging his presence. As Sam moved further into the hallway, one of the mirrors caught his reflection, and then, like an echo of Lisa's own journey, it began to shift. The glass rippled, the boy's image replaced with a scene. A small bedroom, cluttered with toys and drawings pinned haphazardly to the walls. "That's my room," Sam whispered, stepping closer. His eyes widened as he saw himself sitting on the bed in the reflection, hunched over and crying. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. Lisa placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "The house is showing you something from your life, something you've buried. It wants you to face it." "I don't want to," Sam said, his voice rising in panic. "I don't want to see." The reflection continued regardless. The scene shifted, showing a man, older, unshaven, and reeking of anger. He was shouting, the words indistinct but filled with venom. The boy on the bed flinched at every syllable, clutching the stuffed dinosaur tightly. "Is that your dad?" Lisa asked gently. Sam nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "He gets mad all the time. I hide in my room when he drinks. He says I'm the reason Mom left." The words hung heavy in the air. Lisa's chest tightened at the boy's pain, so raw and familiar. "Sam," she said softly, "what your dad says isn't true. None of this is your fault." The boy's gaze remained fixed on the mirror. The image shifted again, this time showing Sam in the woods running. He tripped and fell, the dinosaur slipping from his grasp. The man's voice echoed faintly, calling after him. "You can't run forever." "I don't want to go back," Sam whispered. "I don't want to see him again." Lisa crouched down, gently turning him to face her. "You're not alone in this. The house is here to help you understand. And I'll be here too, every step of the way." Sam sniffled, his small hands gripping hers tightly. "Promise, promise," Lisa said, her voice steady. The house seemed to hum in approval. One of the doors at the end of the hallway creaked open, revealing another room bathed in soft, golden light. "It's time," Lisa said. "Are you ready?" Sam hesitated but nodded. Together, they walked toward the open door, the light spilling over them as the house prepared to reveal its truth. The room beyond the open door was bathed in a warm, golden light, in stark contrast to the house's oppressive gloom. Lisa and Sam stepped inside cautiously, the boy's small hand gripping hers like a lifeline. The space felt strangely familiar, and Lisa recognized why almost immediately. It was a recreation of Sam's bedroom. The walls were lined with faded posters of dinosaurs. A stack of comic books lay haphazardly on the floor, and the stuffed dinosaur he clutched was mirrored in a twin lying on the bed. Sam stopped abruptly, his eyes fixed on the bed. There, sitting with his head bowed, was another version of himself, frozen in time. The reflection from the mirror had taken shape, the younger Sam clutching his knees to his chest. He looked up slowly, his face streaked with tears. "Is that me?" Sam whispered. "Yes," Lisa said softly. "This is a memory." As if triggered by her words, the scene around them began to move. The door to the room swung open, slamming into the wall, and the shadowy figure of a man staggered inside. The father's face was indistinct, like a smudged painting, but the anger radiating from him was unmistakable. "You can't just ignore me, boy," the father bellowed, his voice reverberating unnaturally. "Answer me when I'm talking to you." The younger Sam flinched, burying his face in his knees. The stuffed dinosaur toppled from his grasp and landed on the floor with a muted thud. The real Sam whimpered beside Lisa, his fingers tightening around hers. "I don't want to see this. I don't want to be here." Lisa knelt to his level, her voice steady. "Sam, you've been running from this, haven't you? This moment, this fear, it's been chasing you." Sam nodded, his tears falling freely now. "I thought if I just ran far enough, it would go away." Lisa placed her hands on his shoulders, meeting his gaze. But it didn't, did it? It followed you here, to this house, because it's not about where you are. It's inside you. The boy swallowed hard, glancing at the scene playing out before them. The father's voice grew louder, slurred, and venomous. You're useless, just like your mother. You'll never be anything. Sam winced, but Lisa squeezed his shoulder gently. Sam, Lisa tome. You're not useless. You're not what he says you are. Those are his words, not yours. Do you understand? Sam hesitated, his lips trembling. What if he's right? He's not, Lisa said firmly. You're brave, Sam. Braver than you know. You've carried this pain for so long, but now it's time to let it go. The younger Sam on the bed lifted his head, his tear-filled eyes meeting the real Sam's. The father's shouting faded into a low murmur, the edges of his form dissolving into shadow. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Lisa said. Tell him. Say the words you've been too scared to say. Sam turned toward the shadowy figure of his father, his small chest rising and falling with quick breaths. You're wrong, he said, his voice trembling. I'm not useless. And it's not my fault Mom left. It's not my fault. The words echoed in the room, each one breaking the shadowy figure apart. The father dissolved entirely, his form vanishing into wisps of smoke. The room grew brighter, the oppressive weight in the air lifting. The younger Sam stood from the bed, picking up the stuffed dinosaur and cradling it close. He stepped toward the real Sam, their eyes locking. It wasn't your fault, the younger Sam said. You didn't do anything wrong. The two Sams reached for each other, their hands brushing. In that moment, the younger Sam disappeared, his form merging with the boy standing beside Lisa. A warmth spread through the room, and Sam let out a shaky breath. It's gone, he whispered. The feeling, it's gone. Lisa smiled, her heart swelling with pride. You did it, Sam. You faced it. The door behind them opened, leading back into the hallway. The house was quiet, almost serene. Sam turned to Lisa, his expression one of gratitude and newfound strength. Thank you, he said, for helping me. Lisa placed a hand on his shoulder. You help yourself, Sam. You're braver than you think. As they stepped back into the hall, Lisa sensed the house stirring, preparing for what would come next. She had helped Sam face his truth, but she knew another arrival was just around the corner. The hallway greeted them with an eerie calm, the shadows receding into the corners as if the house itself was resting after Sam's revelation. Lisa noticed a subtle change in the air. It felt lighter, less oppressive. The boy beside her clutched the stuffed dinosaur tightly, his steps more confident than before. Do I have to stay? Sam asked quietly, glancing up at Lisa. In the house, I mean. Lisa knelt, meeting his gaze. No, Sam. The house doesn't hold on to people who face their truths. It lets them go. He nodded, though his expression was tinged with uncertainty. But what if it comes back? Lisa placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You're stronger now. If it tries, you'll be ready. And you're not alone. You could talk to someone about this. You don't have to keep it inside. Sam hesitated, then gave a small, determined nod. Okay. The sound of a door creaking behind them drew their attention. Lisa turned, her heart sinking. At the far end of the hallway, another figure had appeared. It was a woman this time, clutching a photo album to her chest. She stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale and tear-streaked. Her expression was a mixture of confusion and fear as her eyes darted between the mirrors lining the walls. Who's that? Sam whispered, stepping closer to Lisa. I don't know, Lisa said softly, rising to her feet. But she's here for the same reason you were. The woman's gaze locked onto them, her voice shaky as she called out. Where am I? What is this place? Lisa stepped forward, keeping her tone calm and steady. It's okay. You're safe. My name is Lisa, and this is Sam. We can help you. The woman clutched the photo album tighter, her knuckles whitening. I was at home. I was looking at these pictures, and then, I don't remember. How did I get here? It's the house, Lisa explained. It brings people here when they're carrying something they can't face on their own. It wants to help you. The woman shook her head, her voice rising in panic. I don't need help. I just want to go home. I understand, Lisa said gently. but the only way out is through. Trust me. I've been where you are." The woman's eyes flickered to the mirrors, her reflection shifting and distorting. One of the mirrors rippled, the glass clouding before revealing a scene. It was a hospital room, sterile and dimly lit. A young girl lay in a bed, her skin pale, her hair thinning. Machines beeped faintly in the background. The woman gasped, her knees buckling as she staggered backward. No, I can't." Lisa caught her before she fell, steadying her. "You don't have to do this alone," she said firmly. "We're here with you." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the image in the mirror. "That's my daughter," she whispered. "Ellie. She was sick." The scene in the mirror shifted, showing the woman sitting beside the hospital bed, holding the girl's hand as her chest rose and fell with labored breaths. The younger version of the woman was whispering softly, tears streaming down her face. "I was there," the woman said, her voice cracking. "I never left her side." The reflection changed again. Now the bed was empty, the sheets neatly folded. The woman stood in the corner of the room, staring at the emptiness with hollow eyes. "I should have done more," she said, her voice barely audible. "I should have found a better doctor, a better treatment. I should have saved her." Lisa's heart ached at the raw grief in the woman's voice. "You did everything you could," she said. "You were there for her, and that mattered more than anything." The woman shook her head violently. "It wasn't enough. She's gone, and it's my fault." The house seemed to hold its breath as Lisa knelt beside the woman. "It's not your fault," she said firmly. "Sometimes, no matter how much we love someone, no matter how hard we fight, we can't change the outcome. That doesn't mean you failed her." The mirror rippled, the image fading into mist. The woman's sobs quieted as she clung to the photo album, her fingers tracing the worn edges. "I just miss her so much." Lisa nodded, her own throat tight. "I know, and it's okay to miss her. It's okay to grieve, but you can't let it consume you." The woman closed her eyes, her breathing slowing. When she opened them, the fear and guilt had lessened, replaced by something softer, acceptance. The house hummed faintly, and another door opened at the far end of the hall, revealing a path bathed in soft moonlight. Is that my way out?" the woman asked, her voice trembling. Lisa nodded. "It is. You're ready now." The woman hesitated, then turned to Lisa. "Thank you for helping me see." "You help yourself," Lisa said with a small smile. "Be kind to yourself. You deserve it." The woman stepped through the door, the light swallowing her as it closed behind her. The house fell silent again, the air still. Sam looked up at Lisa, his expression thoughtful. "You're really good at this." Lisa chuckled softly, though her heart was heavy. "I think it's the house that's good at this." Sam nodded, then hesitated. "Do you think it'll ever stop? The people coming here?" Lisa glanced at the mirrors, their surfaces still rippling faintly. "No," she said quietly. "But maybe that's the point." The hallway was empty now, save for Lisa and Sam. The mirrors reflected only their forms, calm and still. The house seemed to settle around them, as if acknowledging the weight of what had passed. "Will you stay here forever?" Sam asked, his voice small in the stillness. Lisa looked at him, then at the walls that had become so familiar, the endless shifting doors and the mirrors that held so many truths. She felt the house watching, waiting, its presence heavy but no longer suffocating. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe. Someone has to help the people who come here." Sam frowned, holding his stuffed dinosaur tighter. "But doesn't it get lonely?" Lisa knelt, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "It's not about me anymore. It's about them. The ones who need to see, who need someone to guide them. That's why I stayed, to make sure they don't go through this alone." Sam's gaze dropped to the floor, his brow furrowed in thought. After a moment, he said, "I don't want you to be lonely." Lisa smiled softly. "I'll be okay, Sam. This is where I need to be." The house groaned faintly, the walls shifting as a door appeared near the far end of the hall. Its edges glowed faintly, the light warm and inviting. "That's your way out," Lisa said, rising to her feet. "It's time." Sam hesitated, glancing between the door and Lisa. Will I ever see you again? Lisa's heart ached at his words, but she forced herself to keep her expression steady. You have your whole life ahead of you, Sam. A good life. Don't waste it worrying about me, okay? Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded. He took a step toward the door, then turned back abruptly and hugged her tightly. Thank you, he said, his voice muffled against her. Lisa closed her eyes, holding him close. You're gonna be okay, she whispered. You're stronger than you know. Sam pulled back reluctantly, then turned and walked toward the glowing door. It opened soundlessly as he approached, and he stepped through without looking back. The door closed gently behind him, and the hallway was silent once more. Lisa stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where he disappeared. The quiet of the house pressed around her, but it felt different now, less oppressive, more purposeful. A faint hum resonated through the air, and the mirrors began to shimmer again. Their surfaces rippled, showing the faint outlines of new figures, shadows of those yet to come. Lisa's chest tightened, but she straightened her shoulders. The house had chosen her for a reason. She understood that now. It wasn't just about facing her own truth. It was about helping others do the same. About breaking the cycle of fear and guilt, one soul at a time. She turned toward the mirrors, her reflection staring back at her. This time, it didn't shift or distort. It was just her, tired, weathered, but resolute. Somewhere in the house, a new door creaked open, and Lisa felt the faint stirrings of another arrival. Another soul drawn to the house, seeking something they didn't yet understand. Lisa took a deep breath and started down the hall, ready to meet them. The house hummed its approval, and the cycle began again.